For many entrepreneurs, pitching is done to secure resources and funding to further develop a business idea. Being able to communicate your ideas and goals is vital in convincing your audience why they should support you. This can range from large crowds to a panel of investors or just chatting one-on-one. Of course, presenting your business plan can be difficult and stressful, especially since you aim to show the best of your work that you are passionate about in a limited amount of time. This event hopes to provide you with information and advice so you can leave with a better understanding on how to communicate with your audience. With that said, I'm happy to introduce our guests for this afternoon. Moderating this discussion is Abhishek Balakrishnan, a 2020 graduate currently working at Bright House, a global creative consultancy and business division of Boston Consulting Group. We'll be going through the ins and outs of this topic with Tuan, a graduate of 2018, who is currently Director of Growth at Xterra and had co-founded ScholarJet at the age of 20. Again, please enter any questions in the chat. And now, Abhi, I'll pass the floor over to you.
Thank you, Bernice. Yeah, so everyone who's currently with us today, thank you. And I'll probably run through the questions for a half an hour, and feel free to throw your questions in the chat, and Tuan and I can answer them. Mainly Tuan will answer them as we get to the end of the conversation. But yeah, thank you. So Tuan, how are you doing today?
Doing good.
Good, awesome.
I mean, I wish I had more sun, but it's coming next week. Next week is 60 degrees.
I'm excited. I'm currently in DC and I'm waiting for the cherry blossoms to come out. But so, shall we get started?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, awesome. So, thank you, Bernice, for the great introduction around pitching your business. I mean, from my time working at Idea, it was incredible to see a lot of entrepreneurs come in, even yourself, and really, put yourself out there and a lot of what your passions and your business forth, and really communicating what you're doing. So I'm excited to talk to you because I remember your first pitch, I think a couple of years, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I remember you were up on stage and did a whole backflip, and I was just like, I got to listen to this guy. What he's doing is really impressive. So to kick the conversation off, I wanted to get an understanding from someone who's been through a lot of pitches. What would you describe as pitching? What does that even mean? How would you describe pitching your business?
It's having a conversation. Honestly, it's not any type of performances. Oh, I have a husky, so he's gonna be making noises. So yeah, I mean, it's basically having a conversation. You just gotta be your. I mean, this is so cliche. People don't really know what it means, but it's basically amplifying a version of yourself. And it's also about, I'm pretty sure on an everyday occurrence, you convince your friends to do things. You convince your girlfriends to do things, boyfriend to do things. You convince people to do things all the time. Pitching is basically convincing somebody to buy into your idea. Now, if you think about it that way, how is it that you're able to do it so easily when it comes to our friends, when you can convince your friends to, let's go grab boba, right? So easily. You had the connection inside your head with your friends already, but then now you were talking with basically complete strangers and a large scale audience. So how do you frame that? But I just think of it as having a conversation. And basically, I do this sometimes, like back in college, which is like a few years ago. I used to watch how to pick up girls videos, right? And basically all these guys, and you guys want to watch some of these, it's pretty funny. So the channel is called Simple Pickup. Basically, they just hit up girls and just start talking, and just trying to figure whether or not they can grab their numbers or ask them out on a date, just completely random, right? Doing that eliminates the fear, but also helps you kind of establish connections pretty quickly. I'll leave it out there. There's a lot to go off here, but let's keep going.
It's interesting that you bring it up. It's around having a conversation, right? Like you're at the end of the day, you're hoping to convince someone what you're working on is worth their time, money, and interest, right? But at the same time, it's something that you could apply, in your friends and your relationships and everyday aspects of life. And it's interesting that you bring up a lot of these stories. And I actually wanted to ask you, tell me a story about one of your best pitches. What was that experience like? Who you're speaking to? Why was it a memorable pitch?
I gotta say, I probably have about 70% standing ovation for all of my public speakings, which I don't aim for at all. So what I've learned, and this is a tip not only coming from me, but also some of the most prominent speakers, that you have to be in a giving mentality. And so
Mhm.
to be specific, there was when I was maybe 16 or 15, I was a part of a leadership program at Harvard.
Mhm.
And at the end of the program, I gave a speech in a spoken poetry type of form. And so this is a particular talent of mine when I was, in Vietnam. So I grew up in Vietnam, and I
Mhm.
came here when I was 10. And in Vietnam, the way that you learn essentially your own language is to
Mhm.
learn poetry, which is weird, but
Really? Okay.
it's baked into the culture. It's like the way that you interpret different languages and what it means is very different from what English is interpreted.
Mhm.
So Vietnamese language, it's more metaphorical.
Okay.
And people use that language since they were little. And then
Mhm.
as they grow up, they make it concrete, but it's still very metaphorical. And so I took that poetry speaking skills when I was very little, because in Vietnam, you were forced to stand up as a little kid in front of all your classmates to recite an 8-page poem
Wow.
when you were little. And if you miss one word or did not say the right grammatical ways to say certain things, you get deduct 1 point. And if you get deduct 3 times, you fail. So
Interesting.
you can see the high pressure environment that I was placed in. But I brought that skill set into my speaking. So at Harvard, I delivered this spoken poetry that I wrote myself.
Mhm.
I put in, I didn't worry much about grammatical errors, because in poetry, there's no need for grammars. You can say whatever you want. If you look at some of the lyrics, like you can rhyme city with city, like it's easy
Mhm.
to get the point across without paying so much more about the grammatical errors and the way that you say things. But after I delivered the spoken word poem, I was able to get a standing ovation. But also, this is just sidetrack. Like that's sort of like what I remember the most. But
Mhm.
for the business side, I won probably about 100K through winning about 15 pitch competitions. So take it with a grain of salt.
I mean, that's very cool, and I appreciate that story where I think you've connected a lot of what you've learned from the past, and I think it's really interesting that in Vietnamese language you learn through poetry and a lot of these different forms of like taking language and performing
Yes.
and being able to communicate and then bringing it into what you do now and communicating your business, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's really really cool, and I think a lot of people can learn from different things that they've grown up with from life, which is really awesome. And I appreciate you being willing to share that story, because sometimes the inspiration, you don't need to always look outwards or too far. It's something that you've always grown up with. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I think, pitching, right? Like you said, you had these, first, second, third strikes, and, you fail.
Mhm.
Failure is a huge, huge aspect of, pitching your business. And it's sometimes a very scary aspect, and it's sometimes a tough experience. And I
Mhm.
was wondering, if you don't mind, what are some of the toughest experiences you've had, pitching your business or communicating what you're doing with an investor or someone else? What about that experience was challenging, and what did you learn from it?
Mm. So this is gonna be getting into a touchy subject. I probably have gotten rejected by over 2,000 investors when I was running
Wow.
my previous company. So uh, it's just a testament to sort of like how hard I can try and work to get in front of these people. But I think a lot of times when I felt very uncomfortable speaking and
Hmm.
also kind of have a hard time connecting with the audience, is that I was speaking in front of investors who are basically super old, and the only common language is golf. And I'm just a little kid speaking about my business and having them ask questions about like, hey, is this a school projects, right? And I was just like,
Hmm.
part of me is like, dang, I'm so frustrated and furious. But the other part is like, what can I do at this point?
Hmm.
And so, I mean, business pitch is very different, right? Sometimes as a CEO, you kind of just have to take care of the pitch yourself. But if you have a co-founder, and if it's in a setting that your co-founder can be a part of, or you have a partner that is with you, they can be the ancillary support to you.
Mhm.
Right? They can be there to answer questions or trying to make it be your essentially your Robin to your Batman, right? And so they can help you relieve some of that pressure. And so I had my
Mhm.
partner Joe at the time to help me tackle some of the questions. That gave me comfort. So the scenario of that was that I was pitching in front of like 50 old white men who was like just really skeptical about our concept.
Mhm.
And the scenario is that I can't figure out a way to connect with the audience. Right.
Mhm.
Usually, whenever I'm speaking in front of college students, like 300 of them, 100 of them, no problem. I've been there. I've done that. I share your experience. I can crack a joke saying the word lit and you would understand. But if I
Yeah.
said the same thing with this audience, I would get smashed. Right. And so I
Mhm.
was just like, I can't find common ground. And that's, I think, is the hardest part.
It's finding that common ground. And I appreciate that from that experience you learned, sometimes you don't have to go at it alone, right? You have a co-founder, you have a partner, you have a team member who you can kind of lean on for certain aspects of answering questions and certain ways of carrying the story forward. So I
Mhm.
appreciate that. And I think you bring me to the next point, right? Which is part of just understanding audience. Because most of the time when you're pitching a business, a lot of times we watch Shark Tank and you're in front of this room of these scary looking judges and you're you're on your own. But a lot of times pitching your business depends on the audience, right? Like you may not always be presenting and pitching in front of investor. A big part of business, right? Like you're saying, are these conversations where you're trying to convince customers or you're trying to convince team members to join? So tell me a little bit more about what it's like to think about your audiences and the different audiences people need to think about when they're trying to communicate their business idea.
Yeah, I mean, you have to tailor the conversation. You
Mhm.
like in terms of dating too. Think about it. It's like, I mean, modern day dating is very different, right? You swipe right, you swipe left, and then you start talking to the other girls. And
Mhm.
my point of that is you don't know the general audience, but you can kind of shape the persona into a particular person that you feel familiar with.
Mhm.
So when I'm talking to a wide variety of audience, I'm speaking from experience in terms of creating that, say, imaginary friend in front of my face, saying that, oh, this is the audience that I'm speaking to, and these are the things that I can relate with, right? So
Mhm.
when I'm talking to you guys, for everyone's watching, I'm assuming college age, probably from Northeastern Network. I can bring up Rebecca's if I want to, but it's not there anymore, and everyone's sad. And so, a lot of these things, when you mention, just by mentioning something in common, just to test the
Mhm.
water, actually, just to test the water. So for example, I was giving a talk at UMass Lowell's where in the audience, it was like a whole group of Asian. And my point of public speaking there is that I need to engage the audience somehow. And I'm about to make this audience laugh. So I'm just like in my head, I was like, hey, like when I was applying to college, I had to freaking apply to Harvard because I'm freaking Asian. So right. And then that audience laugh because then now the other audience, basically who doesn't have similar backgrounds, can sort of like start to pay attention.
Mhm.
They might be dozing off, but if I started to make connections with people who uh, have similar experiences with me, then
Mhm.
other people will start to tune in because I'm like, huh, what's going on here? Why is there this inside joke that I'm not a part of that I also want to be a part of? And
Yeah.
so playing with that psychological tricks, even when you aren't familiar with the audience, you kind of have to pick and choose, test the water in terms of what can I say that people, after they hear that sentence, be like, oh, he's just like me.
Yeah. No, I mean, you bring up a really interesting point because I think it reminds me of this TED Talk I actually watched about a month ago about the different languages of being a human, right? And when we think about language, it's generally like English, Spanish, Vietnamese, right? But a
Yeah.
lot of times language could also be experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what you did was really interesting, where you try to connect with people on some of the experiences you faced that others might face. And that was like a language that a lot of people could connect on. But at the same time too, when you don't speak a language, right, sometimes people feel left out, and it gives people an opportunity to pay attention. So that was really interesting how you used an experience as a language as a way to connect. And I think that's something that's really interesting in the moment when you're speaking with a bunch of different stakeholders, right? And you're trying to find those ways to connect. A lot of times it's a good way to connect via experience.
Yeah,
So
I mean, the thing about public speaking is very psychological. And when I talk to one-on-one conversation with investors, for example, it's completely different when you're presenting in front of a panel. And so I sort of have to think about, okay, what can I say about this person in a way that makes it feel as though they are understood? So what I mean is, by you kind of have to listen to the responses, listen to the oohs and the ah, and listen to what they have already been telling you. And then this is an FBI technique, okay? And you can learn this from master class. Basically, the FBI techniques to showcase that you as a speaker is listening is to repeat the 3 words that people have already said to you from their previous sentence. So if you can repeat to them what they just told you, they feel as though they are listening. So, you're doing a good job. You're basically summarizing what I'm saying, Abhi, and you're giving it your own opinion after you summarize what I said. So that means you're listening. And so by doing that, you have my attention, I have your attention, and we are connecting.
And we're having a good time. I appreciate a lot of the advice. I think it's interesting that you bring up the FBI point too, because I think repeating and a big part of it, right, is you're not always there for you when you're pitching your business. You're there for them sometimes, and you need to listen. You need to be ready to take in whatever the circumstances are presenting to you, right? So that's super interesting, and I appreciate the nuance to capturing what I'm doing. So the one thing I wanted to bring up, right, is a lot of the things you brought up are really cool tactics that I think a lot of people can, when you walk into a room or when you're up in front of the stage, be ready to like pull out, whether it's connecting with the audience or being able to listen to what investors are saying when they're asking questions. One thing I want to know is the prep, right? I think there's a lot of prep sometimes people go through in pitching a business, and I wanted to understand a little bit more about your routine or your method of prepping. When you, let's say, have a pitch on the next couple of weeks, what are you going through right now, and what are the steps you take to get ready for that?
Cool. Audience, chat, can you put in the chat sort of like your occupation or sort of like your major, or just so that I know how to tailor this for you specifically? Like, if you're an entrepreneur, say you're an entrepreneur. If you're just basically trying to be a leader within your organization, just say that. Whatever it is, so that I would know before I move down from there. Okay.
Wellness and health. Wow.
Cool. There you go. Okay. A lot of entrepreneurs in the audience. Okay.
Econ's very important right now. So
yep.
Love that.
Finance. Yep. A lot of public speaking and finance, marketing. Nice. Cool. I mean, that's good sample size to work off of. So you see what I did there? I just engaged the audience with through Zoom. How hard is that? Oh, it's so difficult these days. Okay, so the practice, right? What I do is very unorthodox, but the way that I do it, it stems from what I already know. And I can sort of explain how it evolved. When I was little in Vietnam, the way that Vietnamese education works is repetition. And I brought that concept not only just for public speaking, but for every aspect of my life. You are essentially training your brains to be so familiar with a particular action or topics that when you wake up, you can just spit it out. Basically, I have muscle memory now to do a backflip. I can just wake up and do a backflip, no problem. But that muscle memory needs to be developed, right? And so for my training to public speaking, in Vietnam, I kind of have to be forced to spit back 8 pages of poetry. How the heck am I going to remember that? Well, the method is you read it over and over and over and over again until it just becomes part of you. And it takes a very long time, right? And so for a lot of my pitches, what I do with my co-founder, and this is tends to be a public facing pitch, once I have to get on stage. What I do is I write a script, very unorthodox. Other people have different methods, but this is the one surefire way that I feel like I would never fail prepping for a pitch. Write a script and memorize it line by line. And then I stand on a stage speaking to a wall, and then I practice at least 20 to 30 times. Each pitch is like 10 minutes. So imagine how long I need to practice.
It's gonna be a long night,
right? And so I was like, I draw a square, and then I make it into a tic-tac-toe, or like maybe even 4x5 squares, and then I check it off each time that I finish. Once I finish, I keep checking until I finish checking every single squares, and then I listen to myself when I present. I'm like, am I getting this? Am I getting this though? Like, can I repeat, or can I say the things that I wanted to say without missing a beat now? And then what I realize is that the moment I finish with the repetition, I can improvise, because it's so ingrained in you that your creativity will come through. So what a lot of people don't know, this is psychology about creativity. Creativity stems from the mundane stuff, which is very interesting. Is that when you think about practicing martial art, punching and kicking is all the basics. But why can someone punch better or kicks better? Well, it's because they have their fundamentals down. They punch 1,000 ways. They kick 1,000 ways. And then when they need to tweak things, they have the fundamentals down. They can just shift, move, ebbs and flow, and they can still move forward and get their point across. So I draw that analogy because I already have the core content down. Now all I have to do is add the cherry on top by making it fun, right? So
No, I mean, carry on.
No, I mean, so as long as you get the gist down, like get all of the script memorized and know it by heart, every single thing that you add on will just make it more amazing.
I mean, I think you're speaking to something that I think I have also overlooked. I mean, I've seen so many pitches, but I think like what you're saying is, at the end of the day, you got to get the fundamentals down, right? You got to know what you're doing so you have that confidence to be a little bit more creative, to do the things that will get people to notice and to get people to remember. That's very cool. And I love how you brought in like martial arts, because I know you have a background in that too. So it's cool, because I think you're pulling in a lot of things that, you know, a lot of people can pull from, whether they're, you know, an entrepreneur or a business student or something. You know, there's a lot of inspiration and a lot of really insightful ways you can add on to your presentation or your pitching from what you've already known. And I think the aspect of being repetitive and being able to get that fundamentals down, and being able, that mundaneness, being able to unlock that creativity that makes your pitch super memorable. Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant. I think that's super cool.
I mean, it's you know, I don't know how other people feel about this, but this is just because I've only seen it from my lens, and I've seen the results, but I've never seen other people practice for pitches. I don't know how they do it, but for the way that I do is as I just repeat until it gets so boring that I don't even want to do it anymore, that I just know it by heart, to the point where literally when I was running my company, 5 years just repeating the same stuff. That if a person calls me up, this is my script. Hi, I'm Tuan. I came to the US when I was 10 years old. Like I just start repeating the script so much so that I'm just like, oh, this is so boring even for me. So I got to spice things up, right? So that's when I'm like, I know what I'm going to say, but I'm going to try and say it in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate this conversation, because I mean, you could Google what goes into a business pitch, right? There's enough content on what are the specific contents that go into like making sure you're communicating, you know, your sales, your business idea, your market, and so forth. But I think what you're speaking to is the stuff that gets overlooked a lot. right? The aspects that make the pitch memorable, that makes the person on the other side really feel like, all right, this person's got what he knows down, but he's also able to answer and be flexible, and he's adaptive and he's creative, and I want to work with this person, right? So it's cool. I think I appreciate that perspective.
I think one more tip I want to point out, sort of
Yeah,
like
go
a
for
more
it. Yeah.
scientific way of to think about this is when you are practicing, this is super tactical. When you are repeating and trying to memorize things, you say you're about to say a line and you forget something in the middle. Don't look back at your script. Wait. Trying to really try and remember. Give it at least 3 minutes to 5 minutes to figure out. And this will help you accelerate your memorization. When you are trying to remember, there is, I forgot what's the name of the neurons, but it's dendrite something in your head. Maybe there's a bio major in here that can tell me what it is. But basically, when you try to remember, this neuron is trying to build stronger connections to that missing link of knowledge. And so the more that you sit there and trying to remember, the stronger the connection is built. Rather than what most people do when they're studying is like, oh, I forgot about this. Let me just look at it real quick and then come back. That doesn't strain the muscle long enough for you to remember. And so I do that a lot. And that's actually helped me memorize things so quickly. Is that whenever I'm stuck at remembering something, I sit there and I think about it. I was like, I try to remember so much. And then the moment I recall or finally take a look at the text, I don't ever forget it again.
Wow. I'm going to definitely try that. I mean, your brain's a muscle. You gotta keep working at it. So I'm definitely going to keep trying that. Yeah. I want to give the audience a good amount of time to ask questions. So I'm going to ask you 2 more questions, and I'm going to open up to the audience. Sure. So I think when we think about pitching, right, we think about the typical in front of a large audience, in front of maybe an investor in a room of specific people who have the money that you want. I was wondering, what are other ways you could pitch your business, right? What are other ways of communicating your business that people kind of overlook? Because we're living in a world, right, where you're no longer in person. You're living in a world where you're not in front of audiences. But I'm pretty sure there are definitely ways where people can communicate this opportunity to convey what they want and what the value of their business is. And it doesn't always need to be in front of like an audience. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts or ideas on what are different ways you can go pitch your business or have that conversation.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, the most successful pitch is actually used without a deck. And that, I'm just saying that on the surface. The deeper reasoning is this. At the early stage of pitching your business, people don't invest in the business, they invest in you. One of the best person who ever taught me sales was actually from Northeastern. His name is Bob Bennett. He's part of the Sherman Center. He comes back from time to time to teach people sales skills. He built the micro fridge company. Wow. If anyone remember that, he sold it and then started another company, and then now massively successful. He's a great guy. He taught me something that I would never forget in sales. The first thing that you pick up your call or Zoom or whatever, focus on building rapport. You got to talk about things that doesn't pertain to the business. You got to talk about things that allows you to establish connections right off the bat. I mean, you can start off with the weather, sure, whatever. But from their response, you can pick up on hints of what to say next. Maybe if you ask about the weather, they're like, oh, it's snowing here. I was like, are you in Texas? Just kidding. So, right. So it's sometimes you just got to establish some of that prior to actually getting to the point. But sometimes you don't stop. You keep going until you're forced to transition. The more, when you're talking to a prospect or a person, the most successful outcome is when the other person talks more than you.
Interesting.
So I spend the majority of my time figuring out how I can build the connection, how I can relate to this person, and how can I make them like me. Well, psychology dictates that, well, if you're talking to a person and they talk more, that means they like you, or else they wouldn't be talking to you, right? And so, but you ever feel it the other way around? It's like if you keep talking, the other person's like, I don't want to keep hearing this, and it's like it's feeling completely disinterested. Yeah. Anywho, yeah. So basically, I spend the majority of my time making the connections, and then the meat of the business will just comes after. The more they like you, the more they know you as a person, the more they know who they're dealing with. Whether or not this guy is serious, whether or not this guy has what it takes, whether or not this guy has a personality that I would be willing to grab a beer with, or something like that. And if you can establish right off the bat, you're golden.
I love that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's relationship building, right? You're not asking for the money. It's really like you're asking for the relationship. So I appreciate that. The last question I want to ask you, and then I want to open it up to audiences, is really on just motivation. I think a lot of us who are in the audience, or including myself, right, we're going to come to the point where we're going to have pitches that are going to be really successful, or they're going to be really bad. And I think whatever happens after a pitch will continuously either motivate you or demotivate you. So I wanted to ask you, what motivates you after you pitch your business, whether it's a good one or bad one? How do you keep going, right? Whether it's a public speaking or sales or whatever it may be, what is that motivation that gets you to reflect on the experience and then also says, wow, I learned something, I'm going to keep going?
So what's your hobby, Abby? What have you been doing these days?
So as you can see in my background, there's a lot of plants. Me and my partner have been really interested in getting into indoor plants. So a lot of what we've been doing is just jumping into like taking care of banana plants or money tree plants. It's a lot of fun. It's a great
That's
thing
so
to do
cool.
indoors. Yeah.
Holy crap. So you've been learning like all of the different growth and depth of the
Fertilizer
soil and everything.
Yeah, fertilizers, plant types, light types. I mean, I think it's a lot harder than I thought it was. I mean, immediately if you put a plant in the wrong conditions, it'll not grow. But if you put it in the right conditions, it'll grow.
Yeah.
But it takes some time to learn it. Not
Cool.
necessarily it's too hard, but it's a lot of fun. Good pastime since we can't go outside too many times.
It's definitely a lot of fun. The more that you get into it, the more you enjoy, get curious about the thing. So, I mean, the reason why I asked you that is I treat public speaking like my freaking hobby. I enjoy it. I enjoy it so much. Like, so how I view public speaking is this. Most people think of it as an annoyance. Oh crap, I have to present my class project at the end of the year. Or, oh crap, I have to do this in front of an audience. I'm so nervous. I'm just like, as I think more about what public speaking is, it's actually a survival skill. How human evolved since, the ape-like ways of things until now is that there are leaders who stand in front of their audience, explain and persuade on ways to shape and structure society to move forward in a certain way. It's such a critical survival skill. For example, you guys watch The Walking Dead? You guys watch all these zombie movies? You guys watch all these dystopian movies? What if one day the US just collapse and we have to fend for ourselves? What's going to happen? Well, there's going to be a person who's capable of being a leader, who's step up, who can speak to the whole group, relate to the whole group, trying to take into account everyone's perspective, create a plan, and then make it so that they feel safe that they can rely on this leader. Public speaking is a critical survival skill. As much as you think about how to make fires or how to set up a tent in the woods as a critical survival skill, this is a survival skill that has built empires. If you think about Julius Caesar and all this stuff, right? And so why I say that is that I fell in love with public speaking because I treasure it as a necessity. So whenever I'm up there, I'm always learning something. Even if I fail, I think about it to ways to make it better next time around. For example, this is one of my secret in public speaking. That's the reason why I do the front flip or back flip, whatever. I want to introduce the element of surprise. So if you think about surprise, that feeling, where does it often evoke? It evoked positively. So for example, surprise birthday party or jump scare, right? What happened when
You're
you
attentive.
surprise?
Yeah,
Yes, it
yeah.
it awoken all of your senses. Your body is built in such a way that when you are surprised, you're literally getting an adrenaline hit, right? And so one time I was speaking at a convention, a national convention. I did a front flip, and then that tells me to not ever do a front flip again. Just gotta do the back flip because I don't have the muscle memory for the front flip. So I did a front flip off the stage. I fell. Not really, like I was like, oh my god, this is ridiculous in my head. But then I play it off. I just like I got up and I was like, good, I got your attention. I was like, oh, but I did. I did a front flip and I failed in front of the stage before I even say anything. And then now they're all listening to me. And I was like, oh, I did a great job, even if I messed up. But then I learned that, hey, like stick to what you know better. It's like do the back flip, not the front one. So my point of saying that is there's always something that you've learned. And sometimes you get a dry audience. You know, even the best comedians like Dave Chappelle's or whatever, he get dry audience. Or sometimes the audience just not resonating, just maybe because it's raining outside, or sometimes the mood is not right. Focus on you. Focus on what you can do. Focus on what you can say. And I mean, there's a lot of nuances and strategy and tactics when it comes to what happens during the engagement. Like, for example, engaging the audience, filling out the energy and all that stuff. That I work on actively. When I'm like, I don't even think about it. It's actually kind of hard for me to even think about what tactic I use until people point it out for me.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's like watering plants.
I love it. I love how you connected that too. That was really cool. I mean, I appreciate what you spoke about because I think I mean, if I look back at all the Shark Tank pitches I've watched or all the pitches I've seen, the the ones I remember are the ones that I think have surprised me or where I've seen something that surprised me. And I think, you know, whether it worked out or not, you got my attention, right? And then I'm going to listen to you, and whatever follows, I'm with you. So that's really cool. And I definitely would love for the audience to, you know, have an opportunity to ask Tuan some questions. If you feel comfortable, I can ask the questions. If not, I mean, if you feel comfortable, you can jump on camera and ask Tuan the question. If not, I can ask the questions for you. So Helen, um,
Helen just asked if I have any YouTube videos demonstrating my public speaking. Honestly, I have some. There was one from sort of like a TEDx talk for the Asian community, but I feel so weird looking at myself from camera. It's so different. It's so different. You have to be there in the audience to feel it, right?
I
But
mean, that's what performers love, right? Like if you go to a concert, it's different when you're not in front of a crowd.
yeah,
That's insane.
so when you look at a YouTube video, you're like, oh, this guy is not that great. But when you're in the audience, oh my God, it is amazing, right? So I mean, it is completely different. I mean, my dream one day is to give my own actual TED talk. So stay tuned. When that comes out, I'll send the video to you.
Awesome.
um,
We have
there's
another
a
one.
yep. If you have a very short time limit, how do you determine what to say, what to cut out? Um, I mean, that's honestly, that's up to what the content that you're talking about, right? That's why I'm saying get the gist, right? If what I'm really good at is with words, to be frank, like I'm actually an introvert, so that's why I really have to be careful with the things that I say. And what I typically do is I use words that a sophomore high schoolers can understand. And if you tie this back to a study on the way that Obama gives his public speaking, that's exactly what he does. They analyze the language. They're like, oh, it's 10th grade level. So when you are trying to essentially the tips to cut down things is that make sure that the things that you say come across very easily understood, no complexity. Break down the language.
I agree with that, and I think you're speaking about something that I've seen a lot of scenarios around where you don't have a lot of time, and you know sometimes people just want it plain and simple because they don't have enough time, and if you spend too much time using jargon or words that people don't understand, uh, your message is not going to get across. So I think like what you're saying is definitely know it right, note simply, and then also get a chance to know your audience as well to understand what they want, right?
Yeah, I mean, this also comes with the way you write the script, the way you practice, and then you have plenty of prep time to do that. So you'll get there.
We have another question.
I do a 60-second pitch 2 times a month. Should it be the same pitch memorized since it's the same audience most of the time? Then just edit. I mean, you kind of answered your own questions there. You memorize it by heart, and then you add the flavor as much as you want.
Yeah.
When you can't seem to sell, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, to add on to that, I think like definitely depends on your audience, and if it's the same audience, I mean, you know, just be creative. I mean, make it memorable, make it something that people want to keep in their mind when they walk away. So, yeah, add that extra flavor, like Tuan was saying.
It's actually quite funny when I say make it memorable. When you say make it memorable, make it like make the audience do this, do that. It feels like, oh, I have to do the work. I was like, no, don't think about it that way. Think about it this way. What can you do to make it more enjoyable for yourself? Right? Can you add in a joke that you think it's funny? Right? Can you say certain things or do certain things that's like it's natural to you when you're talking to your brother or sisters and stuff like that, right? Just make it fun for yourself, and then the audience will enjoy it too. You know what's funny? So I think about a lot of different psychology, and I come across sort of like some of the ways that girls like about guys, for example, is that I mean, these are books written by women, right? And so I've learned from their perspective. It's like girls like guys who are happy. They're curious as to what they're doing, and they want to be a part of that, right? And so I'm just like, if you are happy and you enjoying yourself in front of the audience, then the audience will enjoy themselves too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you can't seem to sell your points from your pitches, do you have suggestions on how to bounce back from those failures?
Understanding your question, and feel free to chat. I think it's when a pitch is going through and maybe the audience or investor is not understanding what's coming across, and it just seems like they're not understanding, and you're kind of trapped a little bit. How do you kind of bounce back from that? Is that what I'm getting at, Tracy? Or if you want to jump off mute, you could feel free to. Okay.
So what I would do is stop. Just stop in the middle of the presentation, ask to clarify. Ask, hey, are you getting what I'm telling you? Do you have any specific questions right now? So I wouldn't recommend this tip to you if you don't know the core as to what you're saying. So what I mean is that once you already memorize what you're about to say, you can go off script and then hop right back on, right? As long as you know that, then you can always jump off script and reading the audience intent. So if you're in person, you can actually see their faces. You can read whether or not they're following you. If not, stop. You don't have to go to the end. So I'd learned this very long time ago. It's much better. So have you ever been so frustrated in class because your professor is going super fast, and then at the very end of the semester, he gave you a test and everyone fails, right? The good professors or the good teachers focus on the fundamentals. They want people to understand the basics, and the advanced stuff will come by the more the students want to dig deeper if they wanted to. Same goes with public speaking in the audience. You want to make sure that they understand the 1, 2, 3 points that you want. Any other stuff is not important. But if you come across a slide or if you come across a speaking point that they do not seem to understand, but it's very important for your pitch, stop. Focus on trying to clarify it in your own way or in the way that the audience understand before moving on.
I think that's a really good point, because I think there are a lot of times where you might even hear like, I just don't get it. I don't understand, right? And that can be a little jarring for a lot of people, including myself, whenever I hear that. I think the point you make is just stop, take a moment to listen, bring it together, and kind of come back to it with the way where you're incorporating some of the feedback and you're getting that clarification, because then you know that person's listening, and sometimes you may just need that extra time to really hear, because you already know the stuff. I'm pretty sure you know it. I think it's just taking that extra moment to incorporate their feedback and answer that question.
Yeah. So a good question to ask that guy or that girl in the audience who's like super confused is trying to get the understanding as to the perspective where they're coming from. So what I mean is explain to me what exactly about this that you do not understand. Tell me from your perspective how you're seeing what I'm seeing, right? So by understanding that, uh, the more experience you get in getting your point across. A lot of time when people are on stage having a complex topic to discuss, people just assume that other people see things the same way they do, but they don't. And so you have to really speak in a way that it's actually coming from the audience perspective, which is very hard.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, if there's only one thing I'd add is just not to be defensive. I think like that's the toughest thing to do is sometimes because you're presenting something you're really passionate about is just being polite, being respectful, and being like, yeah, and just not being too defensive because that'll put everyone on edge.
I have 2 tips regarding not to be defensive. One is if you come across the questions that you feel like, oh my God, why would anyone ask this? Is this person dumb or what? Right? Which is not a really good response to say to a person. So what you should follow up is when someone is like trying to attack you or trying to ask questions that feels like you are offended, keep asking questions back. Keep asking for clarification until the funny thing is that I oftentimes get into argument with people, not public speaking, just in general. My tactic is keep asking questions until they themselves realize where they go wrong, and then they'll stop and appreciate you for it, right? And so questions is a good weapon to basically defend yourself against questions that may offend you. And second is compliment. Focus. There is a viral video out there about how to deal with school bullies. Bullies can't bully you if you like them. So what I mean is that you can't bully people who adore you or compliment you or look up to you, essentially. And so if they ask or say something that offends you or makes it seem like they're belittling you, you have to first off figure out a way to appreciate that person first.
It's a good point. And do we have any more questions?
Feel free to type them in. I'm all here for the next 10 minutes.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
If you want to list your top 3 tips, or top 5.
Okay. Let's see. I went over a whole bunch of them actually. Oh, appearance. Look good. As much as it is, it's like you ever heard about the wisdom of, oh, don't judge the book by its cover? Yeah, 90% of the population doesn't follow that wisdom.
I think you're right.
90%.
My drama teacher gave me the best advice. I think it was like dress like each day is your last because you just don't know what you're going to need to be dressed up for. So,
yeah, you gotta look good.
Yep.
You ain't Mark Zuckerberg.
Hey, Bernice.
Okay, so I guess we can start wrapping up the event. Thank you everyone in the audience for attending, and thank you to Tuan and Abhi for the insight that you guys have provided. For everyone attending, I'm putting a link in the chat just for your feedback, so please take a quick minute to fill it out before you go. And a few other things that I'd like to mention before we go is that our annual Giving Day is coming up soon, so look out for opportunities to make an impact in the Northeastern community. And I also invite you to check out our website, which houses a range of resources for any career or entrepreneurial goal that you might have, information on how to get more involved with the community. I'll paste the link also for that. And we also offer just-in-time mentoring for individuals with quick questions about their career, business, or any projects that they're working on and need some guidance with. On the other hand, if you're interested in being a mentor, please don't hesitate to reach out to us in the alumni office and we can work together. So thank you everyone for attending the event and have a wonderful evening.
Me and Abhi is on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out for questions.
Yeah, feel free to reach out. And yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us wherever you guys may be. And I hope you guys have a great week. And thank you, Tuan, again, for for providing a really interesting perspective on public speaking, which I don't think a lot of us get a chance to hear. So thank you.
It was fun. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Bernice, for inviting us to this. So have a good one, everyone.